Hello folks, today we've got some interesting news. Minister Givan, the Northern Ireland Minister for Education, has removed the transgender guidance that was imposed by the Education Authority in 2019 on all schools. That guidance was a 60-page document that had many different provisions in it with regards to transgender ideology and forced on schools. Well, what has happened is the minister announced this initially in May, that it was his intent to do so. Well, the Assembly has now got up and going, and he has announced that yes, this transgender guidance is going to be removed. Now, there's four things in this that I think really will affect and change things. So firstly, teachers will no longer be expected or forced or compelled to use preferred pronouns. Okay, now that means that's done so because the minister has said that under the terms of the freedom of expression, that cannot be compelled. Now, teachers can be expected and schools can be expected to work with pupils, but there is no forcing of or compelling of teachers to use preferred pronouns. Second thing is toilets, changing rooms, and sports. You will have to use the sport and the changing rooms and the toilet of your own biological sex that you were born with. Okay, so this is good. It's something to be I suppose welcomed as a Christian, because it poses the end of the current regime of transgender ideology being forced in schools, this identitarian ideology that is opposed to biological reality and just reality in general. Now, as a Christian, we sort of look at this and go, well, this is a step forward towards the biblical approach, because the Bible teaches very clearly that God created them male and female, and that was stated in Genesis and reaffirmed by none other than Jesus himself. So Christians have to do that. Now, what was sad was that at the time there were ministers and clergy people who were on the Education Authority, and I believe that there were only two people that voted against this at the time, and they were not the clergy. The two people who voted against this were Jonathan Craig and Nelson Colson, both DUP representatives at the time. So what it's saying is that the DUP is more conservative than many clergymen today, and that's part of the thing that we're doing in this podcast. We're trying to say, look, we need to have a biblical worldview, and we need to have a biblical worldview that is installed not just within the church, but the church needs to go out and share that worldview and with the world, and that worldview is true. It is the most beautiful worldview. It is the right worldview, and as such, it needs to be it is the source of all guidance in terms of morality. So we're going to see today. I was listening on the news, and I'm already hearing the left losing their mind over this issue, and we shouldn't be shocked at that. Why do the heathen rage, it says in Psalm 2. But we'll see also some of the churches now saying, oh, we supported this at the time, and some did, but there were also clergy people who voted for this. And where is the accountability within the church structures? Where is the accountability for those who supported this stuff or didn't oppose it when they had the ability to do so in their position? See, this is why so many people are now going to independent education and homeschooling, because people have lost confidence in the state. And I suppose biblically we maybe shouldn't have trusted the state, because the state was never meant to was never meant to do all of the stuff that it's now doing. This was the role of parents, it was the role of the church, and that's exactly where we find education comes from initially. But like there are people who but I'm not here to knock people who are sending their kids to a Christian a school with a Christian ethos and stuff. But this is why many of us are opting for this. But it'll be interesting to see what is the response from the left. I can only imagine today in the assembly we're going to see the usual suspects supporting this move, and then many coming to the reality that, look, you can't live in a world without biological sex, because this is God's world and God made them male and female. We can't live in a world that does not ascribe to the biblical order of things on sexuality and marriage, because this is God's world and He made the operating system, as my good friend Andrew Samlin said, to think in this way. But look, this is a quick update. It's something to celebrate. We're far from where we're meant to be, but God is shaking things up in this world today. There's stuff happening, and while we see a lot of bad stuff happening, Christians need to also celebrate when God is doing something good, and this is one example of where something has been good. And I know there's been MLAs and there have been pushing this from behind the scenes. There's been groups that have been doing this as well. We've seen TUV ask questions. I know of others within the DUP were pushing this as well, and we're asking questions. We're privately asking and using their influence to see what was going to happen, especially now that the Supreme Court has now come down on this so heavily. But watch and see. I suspect that some of these left-wing organisations and some of these state organisations and MLAs, we will see that the left-wing MLAs, we're going to see them pushing the transgender agenda still. It's not over. This fight isn't over. And by the way, folks, as I said, even if we win the trans issue, there is still much further to go before we get to a biblical stance on sexuality. So look, just a quick update. Speak soon. Bye.